try to stop me, it's gonna be some dreadhead. It's in your lobby. You don't want no problem with me.
What's going on, my 7th grade U.S. history class? Today we're going to have a review of the colonial America. Alright, I want to start off with the Roanoke colony, the lost colony of Roanoke, which was the first attempt of England to try and settle a colony, a permanent colony in the Americas. They tried actually twice. The first time being unsuccessful. That the settlers that they sent over here didn't survive, but they sent a second group of 100 people, 91 men, 17 women. And shortly after arriving, the leader of the colony, Mr. John White, he had to leave and go back to Europe in order to get enough supplies to last him. When he returned, after 3 years, which he didn't expect, he actually was caught up in the war with Spain. He returned and he found that the colony was deserted. Upon his return, they actually noticed in a tree the word Croatoan was carved in it. They thought the settlers had perhaps moved to the Croatoan Island 50 miles away south, but they were never able to really investigate that. Bad weather kept them from investigating, and the Roanoke colonists were never seen again. Alright, next up we're going to talk about Jamestown. But before we get to that, we need to know what a charter is. A charter is a document that granted the right to form a colony. Also, a joint stock company, alright, which was a company invested or bought with shares or part ownership. So investors invested and bought shares, and all the profits were shared amongst those people that invested. So Jamestown was the very first permanent English colony in North America. It was settled in 1607 in Jamestown, Virginia. During the first winter, just like in Roanoke, they had some hardships. Over half the colonists died. Jamestown was known for its success as a grower of the tobacco plant, which was its cash crop. It also had a headright system, which was a system that helped the colony lure people to come. It granted 50 acres of land to the settlers who paid their own way. Also, Jamestown was known for the House of Burgesses, which was the first representative assembly in America. These representatives were elected by the citizens of Jamestown. It was known as the very first legislature. Next, we have the New England colonies. People that came to the New England colonies were seeking religious freedom. All right, so it's one term that we need to know, or two, starting off, is dissented. All right, dissented is a disagreement in beliefs or practices. You also have persecuted. Persecuted means to be mistreated because of your beliefs. All right, we have many of these religious groups that were mistreated in England, so they came to North America in order to seek religious freedom. One of those early groups that came to North America in search of religious freedom, escaping religious persecution, were the Pilgrims. All right, the Pilgrims were also Puritans. Before they got here, though, they established a set of rules that became known as kind of almost like the very first governing document in North America, known as the Mayflower Compact. This document was simply set up to organize orderly government. Each signer of the document promised to obey the laws passed for the general good of the colony. The Mayflower Compact was a key step in the development of a representative democratic government in America. The New England colonies attracted many religious groups, and because of this, these religious groups had very strict beliefs, such as tolerance. All right, tolerance is simply the belief of remaining from putting down or negatively talking about different religious beliefs. They tolerated it, as simple as that. They also we also have in Connecticut something very important that was established by the leader of that colony, Thomas Hooker, something known as the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. It was known as the very first written, or it is known as the very first written constitution in America. That's very important. It established, along with the Mayflower Compact, the precedent for our governmental documents such as our Constitution today. One other key thing was the Rhode Island colony of New England was the very first colony, and the only one at the time, that allowed any religious group or person, a religious belief, to be practiced there. So it was the very first colony to really practice religious freedom for everyone. So they had a lot of tolerance for different religious groups. All right, keyword. Now we're moving forward to the middle colonies. And one key word that we need to know at the beginning is patroons. All right, patroon is a person that is a landowner who received grants, and they ruled these lands as like kings almost. They were, in today's society, they would be known as simply landlords, okay? So you have many colonies that grow in the middle colonies that really expand, and it's mostly in part due to the cash crops that they were able to develop, such as tobacco and indigo, just to name a few. But there also was a big discrepancy between New Netherlands and the English. All right, remember, New Netherlands was a Dutch colony controlled by the Dutch. And the English wanted to gain control of it. They felt like they had the rights to it, and because of that, they sent an English fleet in to attack New Netherlands. And Peter Stuyvesant, the governor of the colony at the time, he simply surrendered to the English without a fight. Another important group were the Quakers. All right, in Pennsylvania and Delaware, you have a lot of Quakers, especially in Pennsylvania. It was headed by William Penn. He believed that he can establish a colony for his religious group, and it would be perfect. It would be considered like a holy experiment, a chance to put his Quakers' ideals into practice. He actually believed, his people believed, that in an inner light rather than the teachings of a religious leader. Quakers were also pacifists, another key word, or people who refused to use force or fight in wars. Penn was also different from most governors because he believed that this land belonged to Native Americans, and because of it, he didn't force his way on Native American lands. He actually tried to negotiate several treaties and pay for certain lands that he wanted. Last up, we have the Southern colonies. Lastly, you have the Southern colonies. All right, Southern colonies were very agriculturally sound or based economies. They grew a lot of cash crops, and because of this, they needed very large labor force. All right, so the labor force they actually brought in were enslaved Africans. The first group of 20 Africans arrived in 1619 aboard a Dutch trading vessel. England also shipped criminals and prisoners of war to the colonies. They could earn their release by working for a period of time, usually 7 years. So many people also came to the colonies as indentured servants. They would have their passage paid by an American, and they agreed to work without pay for a certain length of time. So the difference between an indentured servant and a slave is simply that a slave worked for life, and an indentured servant had a chance at freedom. Maryland was very important because the leader of it, Sir George Calvert, or also known as Lord Baltimore, he wanted a safe place for his Catholics to live. All right. Eventually, he died, and his son Cecilius gave large estates to English aristocrats or rich, which was just another way to say settlements. So estates is a key word. After that, Cecilius Calvert, he actually had a disagreement with the Penn families of Pennsylvania, discrepancy about the boundary line between Pennsylvania and Maryland. They hired Charles Mason and Jeremiah Dixon, two cartographers, to actually draw up a map boundary between the colonies. This line became known as the Mason-Dixon line, which is also the dividing line between the North and the South. In the colonies at this time, you also have clashes with colonists and the governmental leaders. Nathaniel Bacon, or Bacon's Rebellion, which was led by Nathaniel Bacon, who was a young planter in West Virginia. He opposed the colonial government because it was dominated by Easterners, or people from Europe. Many Westerners also resented Berkeley's pledge, who was the governor of Virginia at the time, to stay out of Native American lands, because they believed, like Bacon, they believed that these areas belong to them, and they blamed the government for not clearing the colony of Native Americans. So Bacon led attacks in 1676 on the government, and he almost successfully took over the colony, but he became ill and died. One of the last notes is John Locke. He was a very important English philosopher. He wrote a constitution for the Carolinas, which outlined the jobs and powers of the colony's government. The constitution covered topics such as land divisions and social rank. Locke stated every man has a property in his own person. The labor of his body and the work of his hands are properly his. John Locke is also one of the backers of social contract theory, that the citizens and the government work hand in hand, or work together to accomplish the goal of the majority. Lastly, we have the colony of Georgia. All right, Georgia was founded in 1733. It was the last British colony set up in America. It was a colony created for debtors, people who owed debts, and really couldn't pay it back. This was a way for them to get out of that and also get a fresh start. Also, criminals were sent here, criminals and just poor people in general. So Georgia became a lot of times known as a penal colony. It was also a colony set up in a strategic place. It was a colony right above Florida, right north of Florida, and the British wanted this colony established close to them as a bunker, I guess you could say, from a Spanish attack if they decided to. This ends our review. Thank you all for listening. Download it using the YouTube converter. And remember, never stop grinding. Let's go.
One more label try to stop me. It's gonna be some dreadhead. It's in your lobby. You don't want no problem with me.